Hello and welcome to Code Creative. I'm Travis Tolson. We are going live with a more spontaneous than usual edition of Code Creative. More folks are opening up to offering external services and such. It's been really cool, really exciting to see how things have been developing, but I've been getting a lot of questions about how do I make service portal forms public? How do I make catalog items public in in ServiceNow? How's it going, Genny? Genny asks, how do I get Travis back into my life? Well, here I am. So yeah, I really wanted to address this public catalog item, especially with some of the work that I've been doing with some of the government services in healthcare recently. This one has really been jumping out at me lately. And let's jump over to the screen. So I wanted to set up a quick demo here to give an example. And of course, it asked me to log in as soon as I start. Now, one of the things that gets glossed over a lot when we start talking about public forms is the security element. A lot of times we just tend to shrug off and accept, oh, well, we know we're making it public. We know it's not going to be secure, and that's fine. It'll all be contained to this table. It's not that big of an issue. The problem is that whenever you open up a public endpoint, you're opening up a couple different potential avenues for vulnerabilities. And you really need to think about this one very carefully on how you want to approach it. Now, of course, some of it's real simple of, accidentally exposing read access to personal information. If somebody types into a field their personal information, I've seen some sites deal with this by saying, don't enter personal information into this box. And there's a lot of issues around stuff like that and visibility, but specifically today, I want to talk about the denial of service vulnerability that you open up. Because this one's pretty significant as far as I can tell. Just to give you some quick background on this one, I have accidentally done a denial of service on at least 2 production ServiceNow instances. Once was early in my career, and once was within the last year. And then I started wisening up to throttling my web service calls to ServiceNow instances. And because I've been dealing a lot more with the public stuff recently, I've done some more testing on this and realized just how significant of an issue you could potentially have. So, real quick, I've set up this little demo form here where, you can imagine fields actually being in place. I didn't really have any. If we take a look at how these widgets are implemented, you can see that all I'm really doing is taking a c.server call back to the server script in the service portal widget. All I'm doing is passing an action and a record. And this is where the issue comes into play, is the database insert itself. This is where we actually run into the denial of service issue. So this is all it's doing. You can see this as being kind of a simulated collecting data from the form and then submitting it to the server side. Where did you go? Where did my tab go? There we go. I've just started working with full screen stuff. One of my friends and coworkers, Robert Webb, was badgering me about using my minimized windows and really small windows, and so I've started experimenting. I gave into the peer pressure of using full screen, but I'm still getting used to it. All right, so basically I come in here. When I hit submit, it's going to send that information server side, and what I'll get is an incident record getting created. And you can see these no validation test ones popping up whenever I hit that submit. Now, the problem is that if I look behind the scenes, I can find out pretty quickly using my network call, using sends a post request to this URL. Now, for anybody who's accustomed to working with post messages, you know that the browser is not the only place a post message can be sent. We can send post messages from any client. A browser is just one of many potential clients. Another potential client is called Postman. So I have set up in Postman it is calling this same URL endpoint, passing the same data that the browser client is. Now, I did have to grab some cookie information and a couple of other things. So it's possible that this particular call could become invalid at some point, at which point I'd have to refresh those cookies. But if I come back here and send this message, okay, so I got an empty result this time. So this time the result didn't work. But that's okay, because I can come in here and I can renew the cookie. And of course, if I were, approaching this from a more savvy standpoint, I would write code that would grab the cookie for me and update it automatically. I'm doing all this manually right now. I hit send, and oh no, it didn't work. Or is it working and I just don't realize it? Okay, nope, not working. Gotta love the live demos. Let's see, what am I missing? So if I take a look here, I wonder if my token updated. Maybe my X-user token updated. Let's grab, yep, it did. Now I hit send. Ah, there we go. Now I get a result back. And that result's my indication that the message did work. I jump over here. And there we go. We've got a Postman no validation test incident that was created. Now, you might be wondering yourselves, okay, that's great. So you can call it from another client. Why is this an issue? Well, I can also write a script, Python, Node.js, another ServiceNow instance, pretty much whatever I choose to use, and I can bombard this same message over and over and over and over. And it is letting me do it again and again and again and again. And imagine this running at the speed of a computer. So with a script, I can turn around and I can scale this out. And in case you're wondering, the accidents that I have had were single computer client. I've got a 10-year-old machine sitting in my living room that I usually offload these types of background jobs to. And, it's running a bunch of other stuff. It's got 6 gigs of RAM. It's really not a powerful machine. And that was the one that took down the production instances. Now, that was on authenticated endpoints, so it was trusting me as a user. And I imagine that there's a little more security behind those on production instances. But for these public ones, it's hard to imagine exactly what they might have in place. I could see them having some security on production instances that may deflect these situations for unauthenticated users. Obviously, I'm not going to go out and try this. Unless a customer calls me and asks, or ServiceNow calls me and asks, I'll be more than happy to, but I believe they'd probably rather have their security teams run these tests. But with that, I can beat up a server pretty quickly. And let's see. I think I've got is it this one? Yeah. So I've got a video that will give you an idea of what will happen. So this is a video within a video for you guys. But basically, I'm currently trying to get to a personal dev instance, this personal dev instance, in fact, while I am performing and not really knowing how ServiceNow's infrastructure is set up. I was told that I could be natively impacting other aspects of their infrastructure. So I've stopped running these tests. So if you're seeing this, please don't go out and run these tests yourself. But I did manage to capture a video of it before I learned better. You can see that for all intents and purposes, this instance is toast. I mean, it's completely unusable. You can hopefully make out the little loader symbol there. And basically what you end up with is a lot of 429 errors. Too many requests, I believe is what it is. And I'm going to fast forward. You can see it starting to, minutes later, still loading. This is over the course of at least 2.5 minutes, maybe longer, of just sitting here waiting for this to load before it actually comes up. And this is not coming from a heavy load. And you can see that some pages will get cached as sorry, an error occurred. So creating these public endpoints is really a significant issue. Now, some of you may be thinking to yourselves, aha, but I can run Google Recaptcha. And I've seen plenty of blogs out there that have taught me how to use Google Recaptcha. And I have to raise an issue with Recaptcha because when Recaptcha is implemented properly, it can provide a defense against this. A lot of times it's not implemented properly. So I have another example here of a public submit. This one is actually technically with Google Recaptcha validation, but, and I've seen a number of blogs and I've seen a number of turnkey type solutions out there that implement Recaptcha exactly like this, which is to say that they turn around and they get the Recaptcha response. And if the response is good, or if the response is not good, they return. If it is good, then they continue along the process and they hit the server. Now, the problem is that we haven't changed anything about the server call. This server call is the exact same that it was before. In other words, while I have prevented my trusted client from sending bad messages, I haven't stopped my untrusted client at all. My untrusted client, my scripts, people out there that would want to take my instance down, they can still do it with ease. Now, taking this one step further, some folks have implemented server-side validation, which is great. And the way a lot of times this will work is you'll have a c.server.get, pass some kind of object, then function, and basically the get will say something to the tune of, let's say, validate CAPTCHA, okay? And so we'll pass to the server, and then if it comes back, we'll say, if, response.good, if the response comes back that the CAPTCHA was good, we've confirmed that this person is a human, then run your server call. And once again, we end up in the exact same issue. This function call, this server call here, is still an unprotected endpoint. We're doing a server-side CAPTCHA validation, but we are still not validating it with the database insert. That database insert is still public exposed, not validated. Now, one potential solution for this is to do your CAPTCHA validation server-side at the same time that you do your database insert. So you do your CAPTCHA and your database insert basically in the same if input statement. And this might work. I have not tested this one. The issue that I can potentially see is dependent on ServiceNow's implementation and your particular implementation of sending the REST message. if a database insert is still required to generate the ServiceNow REST call, then you could still end up in a performance-intensive operation that could still act as a denial of service on your application server. It really depends on the performance of that REST implementation. So, just to kind of recap some of the things that we've covered so far, I'm going to jump over to my iPad screen. So basically, what we've got here is we've got a client. This could be your browser. This could be a malicious client. And we have discussed using some form of CAPTCHA. And we've also got or actually, let me get rid of the CAPTCHA here real quick. And we've got our client, we've got our server. So what we've discussed so far is taking a simple post message and sending it unsecure to the server, and I'll add the database over here. And basically what we have is we then hit our database endpoint, and we have some form of long-running operation here before our response back. Now, this unprotected post is what becomes our issue, because we have a long-running operation. This could be database. This could be this could potentially be a blocking REST call, a synchronous REST call. This could be any number of things that could potentially tie up the instance. The database call is probably the worst of them because the database seems to be what runs out of resources the fastest, at least as far as the limited testing that I've done. So it's those database inserts, the glide record insert, glide record update. Those are the two parts of the operation that seem to be the worst. Now, we have discussed injecting a CAPTCHA check, where we basically say, I actually wanted a little bit more than that, where we turn around and we do a, pardon my handwriting here. Yeesh. All right, that was a little too bad. We do a CAPTCHA check, and then we send the post. But it doesn't really solve the issue because the server's not checking. And then the last thing we discussed was having the CAPTCHA check over on the server side in order to validate with Google that you're a human before we actually make the database call. And this operation here where we hit Google from the server side, this call here would actually go out to Google. This one is the best setup that I think we can do from a purely unauthenticated standpoint. But then that raises the question, what about authentication makes this better? Why is authentication better? Because in reality, authentication to me is the right solution. This CAPTCHA public stuff is a risk for denial of service pretty much no matter how you slice it. So what is it that makes authentication better? Well, frankly, a user registering with your system from a public standpoint is still going to create this risk, but it isolates that risk to a single known endpoint, rather than spreading it out over a couple different potential vectors. One thing is a registration isolates that vector to a single point. So basically, if we want to consider our database server and all of our performance And I spelled performance wrong. Spelling is not my strong suit. I don't even know if that's right. So we've got our database and performance-intensive operations. When it comes to denial of service, these are the things that we want to protect. So, you know, CAPTCHA is one thing that we can do. But as we've demonstrated, if we're not very careful about how we implement it, that can become a liability in and of itself. Authentication is the other. So authentication gives us a couple things. First of all, if a user is abusing the system, we can lock that user. We can prevent them from continuing to send messages. Hey, Justin, how's it going? And Andrew, how's it going, guys? So with authentication, first of all, we have a way of blocking users. We can just inactivate that user, and now they can't continue to send messages. Second of all, it does isolate, as I said, to a single endpoint. Your authentication endpoints become the potential vector for attack. So now we can focus on hardening this with firewalls and exactly, Genny, rate limits. You can start protecting that authentication with, you know, other protections, rate limits and everything else. And, you know, to your point, Genny, rate limits could also be an option for those other APIs as well. You know, so like if we were to use the CAPTCHA, we could also throw rate limiting on top of it. But ultimately, why I would prefer using ServiceNow's native authentication is simple. First of all is the 401 request, or sorry, the 401 response. When authentication fails, it passes a 401 response back to your client. Now, the difference between a 401 response and the 429 is 429 means your instance is, for all intents and purposes, dead. A 401 response, though, is a get operation, ultimately. There's a read operation in there, which is cacheable. Your 401s are cacheable. If you send the same credentials to the server, it can look up in memory quickly without hitting these performance-intensive operations. It can look up quickly and say, yeah, nice try. We've already tried you. Go away. 401, go home. Now, can that endpoint still be overwhelmed? Absolutely. But it's going to take a lot more than my 6 gigs of RAM sitting over behind my couch to down an instance with the 401s. How do I know? Because I tried that one too. Again, before I learned better. ServiceNow was able to churn out 401s until my heart was content and my system choked before ServiceNow did. Not the case with the 429s. Not the case when I was hitting the performance intensive. Andrew, absolutely. Rate limits are just a small stopgap. You know, so basically basically what it comes down to is you want to minimize the footprint. You want to minimize the size of the vector of attack. Is it one REST endpoint or is it your entire API? Authentication lets you narrow that down to one. Justin says, but your new server, on the other hand, no, Justin, I am not trying it with my new server. Something or other. It's an older workstation with 96 gigs of RAM and all the power, and I'm really excited, but right now it's sitting in the corner because I've been too busy with other things, like this. like dealing with denial of service attacks. So yeah, Z420s. Justin knows what I have sitting in here better than I do. HP Z420. But yeah, so we want to minimize the footprint of the attack. By minimizing it to just the authentication endpoint, we greatly limit the avenue for these easy public database inserts. And what we've limited it to is the public user authentication. Now, is ServiceNow's public user authentication bulletproof right now? Maybe not. I'm going to limit my conversation on that one. But what do you get with the ServiceNow authentication? Well, you get something that is tried and tested by thousands. I don't know what tens of thousands, hundreds. I don't know what ServiceNow's customer base is up to, but you get all of the benefits and knowledge. If you go into the knowledge base, you'll see that there are security reports on different things in ServiceNow. And it is a collaborative experience of all the customers submitting this stuff and hardening those endpoints. Oh, Mike's in here. Hey, Mike. Mike Lombardo. Bardo. So,
I was told I needed to come in and make smart alecky comments to you.
Yeah, it's just it's not the same without you in here picking on me. So Sarah has entered the chat. But so when you're using ServiceNow's native external user authentication in CSM, you are benefiting from the collective experience of all ServiceNow's customers. You are, holy crap, Chris Nend is in the house too. Man, we're getting everybody in here today.
You're talking about important stuff.
I'm talking about how I accidentally blowed up ServiceNow instances.
Yeah, that was funny.
I got scared.
I just laughed at you.
Yeah, I had my customer who I have still have a great relationship with, called me up and was like, the instance is down, what happened? And I had this go, I'm so sorry, my bad. That's my fault. I did that one. And I had to call the high desk and ask them to restart the instance.
Please.
Casey says, sadly, some very locked down customers don't allow a user to be in the system at all. No external customer record before they have been through a process. Yeah, and I mean, in some cases, you know, even if you have the external customer where it goes through a process, then you've really got it hardened because now you have trusted users. If you are dealing with pure public registration or pure public submission where you don't even know who it is, all you have is an IP address and a REST message, you know, you have no idea where that message is coming from. It could be anything. And it's those cases we want to mitigate. But you know, what I was talking about with CSM's external user registration is that at least with that, you benefit from the collective experience of ServiceNow customers. You have lots of security reports. I can tell you now, and I really need to make a list of these customers and start reaching out to them, but I can tell you that there are a number of active customers right now that have spun up custom public implementations using CAPTCHA that, as far as I can tell, are just as susceptible despite the fact that they're using CAPTCHA. Hopefully there's not anybody malicious listening in on this. And I know I'm taking a bit of a risk by saying that. I'm not going to highlight which customers here. I'm not going to highlight you know, which blog articles, which turnkey solutions. If you guys have content, have stuff out there that's dealing with CAPTCHA, you may want to go back and review your stuff. Your code may be covered in this discussion in terms of stuff that is at risk. So, you know, but with ServiceNow's external user authentication or external user registration, you at least benefit from the collective experience and continued development for a lot of these other customers that have their own custom spun up implementations, if I wasn't here talking about it or somebody else wasn't here talking about it, if that customer doesn't subscribe to my blog or subscribe to whoever else publishes this type of content, are they ever going to know? Until it's too late, and especially as more government customers, as we get more higher profile customers implementing CSM-like behaviors, custom CSM-like behaviors, this becomes more and more of a risk. Genny says, if you want to go next level secure, you can process your inbound REST API via reverse proxy and have the load balancer handle DDoS protection. And Justin replies, you need K8s and Kubernetes, and I think I said that right. I don't know. And ingress, load, balance, containers. See, these guys are hardcore infrastructure.
Yeah, this is way over my head.
I'm just like accidental. Oh no, I blowsed up the prod. If you have a public instance, do you know how ServiceNow handles licensing around that? I have to default to you're going to have to discuss that with your sales representative. It really depends on how your licensing is structured. I've seen customers implement all kinds of different things in attempts to circumvent the license. I mean, that has never happened. I forgot we've got ServiceNow folks on the line. I think there's some problem with the connection. We're gonna
stop it. See what Justin said.
Justin, please contact your rep. I do not condone any of the behaviors which I have demonstrated today, not the accidentally destroying your prod instance, not the testing it on your personal dev instance, not the attempts to circumvent your ServiceNow licensing. I condone none of these behaviors.
You are going to need like a legal...
I don't think I can publish this one. This is like live stream only, delete forever.
No.
Andrew Barnes says, ServiceNow ninjas are coming after you now. Well, you were talking about moving to North Carolina, so, I mean, not North Carolina.
Oh, stop it.
Completely different, unknown location.
There are some North Carolina, some ServiceNow clients in North Carolina. I'm sure we can get them to go through quite fast for all their ServiceNow needs.
I wonder if they have public unsecure endpoints. Casey says, I think this discussion is great in theory for anyone that can afford CSM, but there are many customers who have pure ITSM needs for external forms.
That's a good point.
It really is. And, this goes back to where there are a lot of customers that are, publishing these endpoints. And I think the best that you can do is to implement CAPTCHA in the proper way with CAPTCHA server-side validation in tandem with your performance-intensive process. Now, again, I'm not 100% sure that the REST call does not count as performance-intensive, and that's my concern with that. And, one of the things with ServiceNow's external user authentication stuff or external user registration stuff is that it is directly tied to CSM, to the point that you can't even use a different portal other than the CSP portal without cloning the widget. Many of the customers I've dealt with on CSM are CSM ITSM hybrid. And I really think that we need to make the best practices affordable to those customers. Especially, Casey says all my government customers are still ITSA unlimited licensing model. And I'm with you, Casey. Most of my customers are ITSM or pseudo CSM, some kind of weird licensing model. And so much of CSM has that ITSM tie-in, and I really think that that ServiceNow needs to find a way to make the licensing accommodate those customers. Of course, I've had a soapbox for years around licensing not accommodating smaller customer use cases and prioritizing, ultra multi-gajillion dollar
Yeah, I've joined you on that soapbox because
bank of
I see the power of ServiceNow for like use in
oh
city
god
management.
yes oh god
Coming
yes
from my background, like this would be so much better, but they can't afford it.
I would I would page, and then here I am bringing the average down. Not at all, Paige. Paige has been here. Yeah, Andrew said ServiceNow elder knowledge 10 person right there.
What was your first knowledge?
Mine was 12. I'm not like
yeah.
I'm not ServiceNow antique, but
The one in New Orleans was your first one? We got good pictures of that.
Ugh. I don't remember knowledge 12.
Exactly.
For reasons. Justin Roberts says, "Where is Express when you need it?"
He's kidding though, not for real.
Yes. Just kidding. In all seriousness, though, I really wish there was a way that we could find something to support those smaller use cases. There are so many of them. I have customers I would love to run on ServiceNow, but they're too small for the use case, and getting a bunch of them cobbled together to make an MSP immediately viable is a challenge. But I mean, here we are in this situation, circling back to Mike Lombardo at ServiceNow Express, rest in pieces. Circling the conversation back, there's absolutely those use cases that are not on CSM because of the licensing model and licensing restrictions. And I think the best thing that we can do is some form of low process intensive validation server side. Rate limiting is a possibility. And I am not a hardcore security, not a hardcore infrastructure expert. Justin has been holding my hand as I've been herp-derping my way through Docker and K8s and
whatever important things. He's making sure you weren't buying a jet engine to put in my house.
Right. So I'm not real strong on this particular area. Justin says, I was thinking about this. State governments should use something like single instance with domain sep. Yes, Justin. Single instance with domain sep in it for each city. Yes, state,
probably not city, but the county level first, and then let the county go from there. But yeah.
The city and county governments. Mm-hmm. Heck, we were talking with a county yesterday about this exact thing with CSM.
Paige, do you not agree with the whole domain sep thing, or?
Domain sep is hard. Back to K20 things.
Are we getting off track? I've only been here for the past 10 minutes, so.
But yeah, circling back to the whole public forms and public form submission that is built in. It's not bulletproof yet.
Better than nothing.
But it's better than nothing, and over time it's going to get better. Whereas if you hand roll something and you do it wrong, odds are you may not find out until it's too late. And again, there are customers right now that, as far as I can tell, are vulnerable because of improperly implemented CAPTCHA. Inspect element, you can read the client-side code and you can see whether or not there is a sequential process or whether the CAPTCHA is submitted with the insert data. I mean, we've kind of already covered it. I know.
They're going to blame this on you, and then you're really
Well-
going to have ServiceNow ninjas sent after you. Know this, right?
Well, it happens.
I'm not saying you. I'm just the front end girl. Just leave me alone.
But, using ServiceNow's external user registration over time is going to be the best solution. Push on your sales rep if you have to. Talk to ServiceNow security, something. It is going to be better than implementing it yourself. If you have to implement it yourself, I completely understand. We've been dealing with this stuff, we've been dealing with this stuff for a long time. We've dealt with the custom not CSM implementations.
Chris Nanda's already called the SWAT team on you. You're doomed.
Already called the SWAT team.
Hey, can you tell them to hold off till after dinner? I'm hungry.
But come on, man! I'm helping to encourage and push on the new UX framework. That's got to count for something, man. But yeah, I mean, if you have to do it on your own, do what you can to protect those endpoints. Submit the validation token with your registration. Implement something, and know a token. Genny says, I built a mid layer that handles the public user authentication. Then the mid calls ServiceNow. Interesting. I would like to see that. We'll have to touch base. I'm very curious about that one. But again, ultimately, the be-all, end-all here, what we are trying to protect when it comes to denial of service is database processes and performance-intensive operations, whether that's CPU-bound or IO-bound, which in this case could potentially be, as I said, a Google CAPTCHA. Why are you fixing my highlights?
Because your highlights bother me.
So, the Google CAPTCHA REST message could potentially be an IO-bound performance-intensive operation. I'm not sure. But at the end of the day, you want to protect the database and the performance-intensive operations from a public external submission. Implementing CAPTCHA improperly does not succeed in that. You need some kind of token. You need some kind of authentication. This is what authentication is ultimately for: is validating trusted users. Authentication is the best answer. In absence of that, some form of CAPTCHA, some sort of human validation, some sort of rate limit should likely be put in place to try and protect those endpoints. So if you are implementing these public forms, again, I've seen so much talk about this here recently. If you are implementing public submission forms, you have to protect those publicly exposed endpoints. Places where you will find publicly exposed endpoints is going to be, we've got, that's one. We've got REST, your scripted REST. We've got processors. UI pages, just to name a few. Anytime you expose any of these, Genny also says he's used something as simple as, I'm guessing that's pronounced JWT, JSON Web Token, I believe is what it stands for. I can see where JWT might be able to be used. Chris Nanda requests that we remove processors. We'll pretend that didn't happen. But any of these can be made public. Um, any of these can be made public, and if they are public and performing database or performance-intensive operations, they need to be protected. They need to be protected properly. And if you want to know if your endpoint is potentially exposed, all you have to do is try hitting that endpoint from Postman. Postman. Chris Nanda says creation of processors has now been reserved for maint only. No! Is that in an ACL? Can I override that? What?
This is how the dev gets broken.
But
no.
But I like it.
You can like it. No.
Processors by default run on the default threads and can easily overwhelm the instance, making it so that users using the UI can no longer access the system, essentially a DDoS attack. This is how we break the dev.
See? I got you, Chris.
Oh, they blocked me. But so using a client that is not a ServiceNow browser to hit those endpoints in the same way that you would expect to hit it from ServiceNow is a way that you can test. If you can hit it from Postman, from a quote-unquote potentially malicious client, then there's a good chance that your endpoint is exposed, barring some kind of rate limiting by ServiceNow, barring some kind of DDoS protection layer that they've got on their production servers. And the only way you'll know about that is if you contact ServiceNow and ask them. But if you can hit that endpoint from something other than ServiceNow without authenticating, then your public endpoint's probably exposed. So Mike Lombardo says, I got the maint role on the cheap, DM me. Is that a hashtag why not glide fast there, Mike? But yeah, so that's really what I wanted to talk about today. With as many people have been asking me about this one lately, I've been dealing with this a lot lately. I've been dealing with exposed endpoints recently. I have identified them on customers recently. This has been basically my last 2 weeks has been nothing but this.
There's a joke in there about exposed endpoints, and it's right there.
Justin says, hashtag why not hack SN. Do not hack SN.
Y'all quit trying to get the SWAT team sent after us.
I'm trying to make ServiceNow better, not have ServiceNow hunt me down.
I want to join the ServiceNow ninjas.
But then
I will come after you.
But you know where I live.
Exactly. That's why they'll hire me.
Oh. Justin, want to get together and make a Cloudflare integration, split the profits.
Justin says, why not hack ServiceNow?
But yeah, so that's really what I wanted to talk about today. You got to watch out for your public endpoints. Anytime you're making these forms public, you are opening up insert and update operations, which by definition are not cacheable. You're opening those performance-intensive operations up to untrusted users, which can eventually lead to bringing down your instance. It's really not a question of can it happen. It's not really a question of if, it's more a question of when. When somebody determines that taking down, a government ServiceNow instance or, a university instance or, somebody that made a stupid comment on Twitter taking down their company's instance, it's really just a question of when somebody gets interested enough to take it down. So, make sure you're doing your due diligence on these public forms and doing what you can to protect them. Chris Nanda says, beware, REST APIs are monitored. So, they already know that
They're watching.
they are watching for me at this point. I swear it was accidental twice. It was on purpose once for the purpose of testing until I think it was Justin told me that I was being a bad community person. So now that Justin has educated me on some of the infrastructure side and why I get no cookie for intentionally attacking ServiceNow.
Chris brings up a good point. He says, but if you are a consultant who builds against something for a customer that could have license implications in the future, you can be held liable if that customer gets hit with a post charge. And we don't want that. So again, talk to your sales representative.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I've learned over the years, and this is a little off topic from the specific at-hand conversation of the denial of service potential on forms. But, with customers, you run into a lot of scenarios where, the licensing is complicated, the licensing is challenging, but ultimately we want to try and work with ServiceNow to make the licensing appropriate so that there's a win-win for the customer and ServiceNow. We don't want to go through and implement stuff that circumvents. CSM is a very powerful tool, very powerful for many different reasons. Yes, the licensing right now can be sticky in some areas, but we want to try and make that better. And the best way to make that better is not by going through and implementing something under the hood that circumvents. The best approach is to talk to other similarly situated customers, come up with a use case, and push it to the ServiceNow sales reps. Chris Nanda says, murky? Yes, murky. So, overall, we want to make the ecosystem better for everybody involved. I personally love a lot about CSM and a lot about the direction it's taken. It's come a really long way since the early days. I was on one of the first CSM projects, and it has come such a long way with some of the ITSM integrations in there. It's really, really improved. And the external user registration aspect, I've had a number of conversations with a number of customers recently where it's worth it. It is worth it to go the proper way for customer service. I had even considered implementing an application that did customer servicey type stuff for municipalities, cities, and government websites. And since then, especially with some of the recent stuff that we've been doing at GlideFast, I've really changed my direction on it because of the speed with which we were able to stand some stuff up using CSM. And some of the areas where I didn't fully use CSM, we're looking at going back and trying to tie it more into CSM to make it stronger, more robust, and more insulated against some of these security issues in the future. So, you really, really want to push back, talk to those sales reps, talk to folks in the community, and overall, let's work together to make this platform better. That's what this whole little spontaneous session was about, was, communicating some of the potential risks for these denial of service on public forms. So let's work together on it. If you have any questions about potential for denial of service, if you're working on public forms and want to know how to go about it, or if you have a use case where you feel like you're being pressured by the licensing to go in a way that's not CSM, hey, reach out to me. I'm more than happy to help be the lightning rod to collect different to collect different sides of the community and bring that case to the right ServiceNow folks so that we can help promote these use cases and get them covered under a licensing structure that works well for everybody and provides the win-win. It doesn't have to be combative. We can all work together and find a way to make the whole ecosystem better. So with that, if you've got any questions, feel free to reach out. And it is time. Little baby has joined the chat. Hi, how you doing? You got anything you want to add?
No, he's good.
No?
Hashtag why not the Tolsons? Yes. Are you good?
All right. Well, thanks a lot, everybody. Appreciate you joining, and hope to see you next time.
Yeah, it was a really great conversation today. Thanks, everyone.